because, most projects are sunk by a really simple phrase.
Hey, Rich, just one thing.
Like what?
One
More thing. We just approved the plan.
Yeah. Just one more thing.
Just one more thing sinks the project management ship. So there's a distance, often, very important distance to be acknowledged in all software projects between the people who build the software and the people who use it as part of their everyday lives. In our high-tech anthropology practice, while listening to the business goals of the customer or the sponsor, are really there to represent the voice of the end user of the software. That's who we're really trying to delight, because that's where the value gets created. And then in 2001, the internet bubble burst, and I lost my job. I lost everything except for one thing. They couldn't take away what I'd learned in those 2 years, and that became the basis for the founding of Menlo Innovations, where we aim, as you said in the introduction, to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. We want to do that for the people who pay for software to be built. We want to do that for the people who use the software that is built, and we want to do it for the people who do the work. Because if we don't create a sustainable system throughout those three constituencies, we will not succeed.
At the strategy and enterprise level, many leaders grapple with product development inefficiencies, could be missed deadlines, budget overruns, product frustrating end users instead of delighting them. At project level, project leaders have disengaged teams, toxic workplace cultures, stifling innovation and productivity. If these challenges sound familiar, this conversation is for you. Our guest today is 𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵, visionary founder of Menlo Innovations and author of Joy in How We Built a Workplace People Love, which is renowned for revolutionizing software development through the Menlo way, an approach that prioritizes joyful collaboration and user-focused design. For a bit of background, he started programming as a kid in 1971. Eventually ended up on Forbes, 𝗏𝗏 Philosophies, simple yet profound. Joy is not a perk, it's the engine of business success. Welcome to Life on IT Project Management, where we connect IT solutions to the project management that drives them, empowering, aspiring, and experienced leaders to achieve real-world success. Today, we'll uncover how 𝗵𝗏 and his team at Menlo Innovations are tackling one of the most compelling missions of our time, designing and building software to end human suffering. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be with you today, Justice.
Thank you. Same here. Now, can you take us back to the beginning? What gaps in traditional software development inspired you to establish Menlo Innovations?
Well, as you mentioned, I started programming when I was a kid, way back in the 70s. It's mind-blowing to me that that's over 50 years ago now, but it's true. And I fell in love with the idea of writing code when I was a kid. And I thought it was a career that could carry me for a lifetime. I got a couple of degrees in computer science, computer engineering, launched what looked like a perfect career. Every year, raises, promotions, stock options, greater title, greater authority, bigger teams, just bigger office. I had everything the world measures as success, but there was a big problem, and it was in here. I started seeing the results that everybody was telling me, Rich, you're doing better than average. You're doing better than others are doing. So we're going to keep moving you along. You're doing great. And I'm looking at the results and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm looking at the results saying, we're missing deadlines, we're blowing budgets, we're delivering poor quality. I might as well come into work in firefighting gear every day because I'm running from emergency to emergency to emergency every single day. And everybody ultimately was unhappy. I was unhappy. The people who worked for me were unhappy. The people who were paying me to do what I did were unhappy. The customers, the end users, and I'm just looking at this and I thought, I can't do this for the rest of my career and survive. I was in my mid-30s. I was in a trough of disillusionment, and I was thinking, I got to get out entirely. But my inner optimist kicked in, and I said, you know what? I think there's a better way, and I'm going to find it. And so I started reading a lot of books, but not books on technology. I started reading books on how do we organize the humans more effectively to do this work. What do we need on the team? What's missing? What new practices could we try that would be more effective than the ones I'd tried up to that point? And I kept searching, and that search went on for quite some time, and I wasn't finding what I was looking for. I knew I would know it when I saw it, but I wasn't finding it. And then 1999 happened, and a whole bunch of things just lined right up for this, what I call the click moment, where everything became clear, and I haven't looked back since. In 1999, I read about extreme programming, which would be a precursor to the Agile software development movement. It had some unusual practices in it, like pair programming. I love the idea of iterative and incremental development. I love the idea of test-driven design and writing automated unit tests. All those things spoke to me. The pair programming thing just kind of struck me as a little bit weird. I wasn't sure how I would feel about that. And then I saw a video on an industrial design firm in California called IDEO that spoke to how do we actually use design thinking to delight the people we intend to serve? How do we gather information from the real experts in the world, the end users? Too often we were using expert designers, but people couldn't understand what they were using. And so those things all lined up perfectly for me, and I changed everything about the place where I was the VP of R&D back in 1999. And got back very quickly within 6 months to what I would now use the term joy for. I wouldn't have used it then. But it's clear to me I was yearning to get back to the joy of what I thought was an amazing profession. There's something unusual about software development. Most people can't understand what it is. It's ethereal. It's teaching a computer how to do what we want it to do. And, to those outside of our profession, software people seem like magicians, right? I mean, we're doing something amazing, and when we do it well, people love what we've done. But I wasn't getting that. I wasn't doing it well enough that people were loving what I was doing, and I had to get back to that, and I did. And then in 2001, the internet bubble burst, and I lost my job. I lost everything except for one thing. They couldn't take away what I'd learned in those 2 years. And that became the basis for the founding of Menlo Innovations, where we aim, as you said in the introduction, to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. We want to do that for the people who pay for software to be built. We want to do that for the people who use the software that is built. And we want to do it for the people who do the work. Because if we don't create a sustainable system throughout those three constituencies, we will not succeed.
Awesome. That's a very, very compelling justification for establishing Menlo Innovations, and thank you for providing the full scope of the background towards that. Now, whether we call it Menlo way or a joyful way, what philosophies are embedded that make it differ from, you did mention specifically extreme programming, right? So what philosophies are embedded that differentiate the Menlo way from traditional SDLC or extreme programming or other agile methodologies?
Yeah. Well, so the idea of iterative and incremental really appealed to me, because too often the projects that I was either programming on in my earliest part of my career or leading as either a manager, a director, or an executive later on, you would work for months on end and then bring something out, and invariably your business sponsors or your customers would say, is that what you thought we wanted? That's not what we needed at all. And of course, at that point, if there were 3 months, 6 months, a year of sunk cost invested in the effort, then you start to get answers like, well, it's not what we need, but we'll learn to get along with it. We'll make it work. We'll make some adjustments later. And it's kind of crushing when that happens, right? Because if you've spent a good portion of your life trying to create something, and when you roll it out, people are like, it's not really what we needed. we'll learn to get along with it. There is no career satisfaction. There is no meaningful work satisfaction in that kind of response from the people we're attempting to serve. So for me, that idea of short cycles, like you would see in extreme programming or Scrum or generally Agile, whether it's 1 week or 2 week sprints, those sort of things, that gives us a chance very quickly to do what we dub make mistakes faster. So I would love in my professional life to never, ever make a mistake. I think that would be amazing. But this side of heaven, I don't think that's going to happen. So given we're going to make mistakes, if we simply accept that as a premise, then we have a business choice. We can either make really big, slow, expensive mistakes, or we can make small mistakes over and over again, correct them quickly before they kill us. And so to me, that idea of short cycles where we can actually demonstrate working software was one of the fundamental early principles of XP and Agile and everything that followed that was really appealing to me for all the obvious business reasons. And then for us, design thinking was very important. We have on our team, we have people who are called high-tech anthropologists. And I will tell you, when I give tours of Menlo, and a lot of people come to visit here, and I tell them, oh, these folks over here, they are our high-tech anthropologists, and they look at me funny. They're like, what? You're a software company. Why would you need anthropologists on a software team? And I look at them and I simply say, if you accept that one day the software we're building is going to be used by humans, wouldn't it be neat if we understood those humans the way an anthropologist would, through observation rather than interview in their native environments? Because it isn't until we can fit the software into their lives that the software will actually delight the people we intend to serve. So our anthropologists study the people we intend to serve. And so that's a lot of what we're trying to do. And then the part that just kind of blows people's minds, even though we're not the only one that does it, but it's still unique and rare, is we do pair programming. In fact, we pair all the roles at Menlo on our projects. So 2 people, 1 computer, 1 keyboard, 1 mouse, collaborating all day long. And we switch those pairs at least every 5 business days. And the reason we do that is because one of the biggest challenges in software development, and I know you've done project management in your career, you know that most software teams are composed of these singular towers of knowledge. There's one person who knows everything about the secret sauce of some project, and nobody else knows what they know. And that feels like job security for that person until one day it becomes a prison from which they cannot escape because they want to go work on the new stuff. They heard about AI. Oh, I want to go join the AI project. They're like, oh no, you stay in your tower. That's where your value is. And suddenly they look down and they see the shackle around their ankle with the spike in the wall. And they're like, oh, I can't leave here anymore, right? And they can't even quit to leave because their resume shows that they're the Oracle 9.1.1 Service Pack 3 expert. And the only people who are going to hire them are for that expertise. So they're trapped in this prison they cannot escape from. In our world, because we pair 2 people, 1 computer, 1 keyboard, 1 mouse, and we switch the pairs every 5 business days, knowledge is being disseminated throughout the team. No one owns the code. It's code stewardship, not code ownership, which means if you want to take a vacation, guess what? You don't have to take your laptop with you. You can actually enjoy your time away because you are not that singular tower of knowledge on your project. So those are some principles that we have here that are universal across all of our projects that generate a completely different result.
Fantastic. So for the audience, 1, 2, 3 things. So when you think of the phrase delighting the customer, one thing I'm hearing about the Menlo way is actually having, because if you just say, well, the agile principle, working software, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond having specific stakeholders, just one set of stakeholders experience the software, use the software, make sure that the software is basically functioning as expected. Beyond that, the Menlo way seeks to actually have them explore different stakeholders that will come in contact with that software, experience, and be delighted by the experience of the software. That is something I think I caught. Then the second piece being peer programming. Now, peer program, of course, extreme programming speaks to peer programming, but one step further is co-ownership, right? Co-stewardship, co-ownership. Some lines of businesses or some teams might say they are practicing extreme programming, but not that way, right? Going beyond extreme programming and actually having co-ownership, co-authorship, where the code repository is co-owned by specific individuals. There are no access issues and stuff like that. So even with or without physical systems, there's no key man gap at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So those issues, there are a myriad of them. I can see how those failures will cause problems. Now let me head straight to a practical example. So can you share a project? So for example, and if you're comfortable doing this, can you share a use case, whether it's internal, external, maybe most likely internal, right? So can you share a specific example project where the Menlo way transformed the experience, where the outcomes delighted customers?
Yeah, so there's a couple I can talk about because they've been out there for quite some. We helped the local university here in Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan Health System, rebuild the organ transplant information system at the University of Michigan. That was a project we started with them about 2003. We worked on it with them about 3.5 years, collaborated with them. Actually, some of the peer programmers were university employees, not our people. So that's a very effective way to transfer knowledge between us, the custom software design and development contract house, and the people who will one day have to maintain and support that for years to come. And that project delivered probably around about 2006 or 2007. And I'll just say I bumped into a neighbor of mine because we're all right here in Ann Arbor. And I didn't know what she did for a living, where she worked. And she said, "Oh, I work at the Organ Transplant Center of Michigan." And I said, "Oh, we built the Otis software." And her face lit up in a smile. She goes, "We love that software. It's still running our organ transplant system 20 years later." And that's a remarkable statement. Most software doesn't last anywhere near that long. And they never had to call us for any emergencies afterwards. It was a clean handoff. And so that's just a really, and literally holding the lives of people in its hands. So very important software. So that's an example of work that we did that actually delighted the people who used it. And I'm going to go back to something you said earlier, because I think this is such an important language differentiation when we talk about this. So there are customers, and if it was an internal project, you could call them sponsors of a project. Those are very important people. They're typically controlling budget. They have a business goal they're trying to achieve, that sort of thing. But very, very seldom is a customer of ours or a sponsor of a project of ours ever an end user of the software we're creating. The end users are in their organization, or the end users are their customers, or maybe their customers' employees and that sort of thing. So there's a distance, often a very important distance to be acknowledged in all software projects between the people who build the software and the people who use it as part of their everyday lives. In our high-tech anthropology practice, while listening to the business goals of the customer or the sponsor, are really there to represent the voice of the end user of the software. That's who we're really trying to delight, because that's where the value gets created. Yes, we have to stay within a time lane. Yes, we have to stay within a budget. Yes, we have to adhere to the standards of their software organization to make sure this will fit inside of their environment, their IT environment, and all those sort of things. But ultimately, there are a set of people who come in every day and they put their hands on the keyboard and mouse to use our work product. they typically don't even know we exist. They don't know who we are. We're a nameless, faceless organization in the background. The Menlo name isn't on the software created. But we find out later, like I found out with my neighbor when they say, oh, that software. And that's joy for us.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Really making real the phrase delighting customer, delighting the end user this time around. Sorry, not customer, delighting the end user, right? I'm delighting them for decades, because for a long time, because as you know, a lot of software, a lot of enterprise software gets retired, legacy systems and stuff like that. Not to even speak of the maintenance months, year to year and all that. Let me ask a question that's stemming from that. How does Menlo Innovations work in such a way that will not be really required? Because you did speak to just zeroing in on how you work closely, collaboratively with the customer and end user to make sure that the knowledge transfer, there are no gaps regarding that. How do you leverage the Menlo ways, culture, and collaborative process to contribute to sustaining a better software? Let me put it that way.
Yeah. So, boy, there's so many questions in that one question. I'm gonna carve it up into a number of different important pieces. So, number one, our high-tech anthropologist job is to go out into the world and find the types of people who are going to use the software we're about to build, and learn about them as humans. Learn their backgrounds, learn their vocabulary, learn their workflows, learn their processes, learn what their hopes and dreams are, learn what having a good day means in their world, right? What are they trying to accomplish when they come into work? And how could whatever we're trying to do for them actually help solve problems they really have? And so our anthropologists go in trying to answer three basic questions about every project we're working on. What problem are we trying to solve? Just amazingly an ignored question in most software teams, right? They're like, we're going to build AI. Like, really? What problem is AI going to solve? Well, we don't have it, so we need it. And I was going, come on. So what problem are we trying to solve? What type of people are we trying to solve it for? And most software is designed by engineers, and it works really well for the engineers who designed it. But I can tell you, less than 1% of the population thinks like an engineer. The rest have different jobs, different goals. So we need to understand the types of people who are working with this software. And then what's the best solution? And the solution, the design of that solution it is very rare. I'm not saying it never happens. There are genius designers in the world who can put themselves in the place of their end users and figure out what needs to be done. Maybe Johnny Ives is that as Apple, or Steve Jobs was, or something. But the rest of us have to work with like regular intellect and IQ and talent. And so we look at it and say, you know what? We are not the experts. The users themselves are the experts. Unfortunately, you can't simply ask them what they need because they are typically unconsciously competent at what they do all day long. That means all the stuff that's really important, they couldn't even tell you about because it's just muscle memory at that point. So through observation, we start to take notes about what we see. We look at where they make mistakes in their current system that they might, self-efface and say, oh, I never make that mistake. But we see everybody make the same mistake. So we're like, oh, how could we design that error out of the system, right? And so that piece is very important. That process, our high-tech anthropology process, is very important. The second part I want to talk about is, how do we interface with the people who are paying us to do the work? What does project management look like here at Menlo? And that's a key element as well, because that's, and I know you know this based on your own background, that's where projects start to get off track. Because, most projects are sunk by a really simple phrase. If the project manager comes in to present a plan and everybody's like, good plan, Rich, you're right on target. That's exactly what we need you to do. Now stick to the plan, right? And then you don't get more than 5 feet out of the meeting room you were in, and somebody says, hey, Rich, just right answer. Like, what? One more thing. We just approved the plan.
Yeah. Just one more thing.
Just one more thing sinks the project management ship. Because as soon as you say, yeah, just one more thing, then it's one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. And then you get to the next presentation and people are like, why'd you do all that stuff? I mean, this was the plan, but you went and did all this other stuff. And so here we have a work capture system. We use story cards. And we tell our clients, nothing gets done till it's handwritten on an index card, estimated in hours, planned at our planning game event, put on a work authorization board on the wall, and demonstrated that same week in a show and tell to the client. But until that work is authorized, we will not work on it. You can say one more thing as much as you want, but if you don't take an action with our planning game to make sure that goes in and something else of equal or greater value goes out, it does not get work done. You can jump up and down, you can scream and shout, but until you take that action in our planning game, it doesn't happen. And that discipline of project management forces the right conversation between the technical team and the business team. Because I will tell you, and you know this, nothing ever gets done anywhere in our lives, personal or professionally, unless we're willing to make trade-off decisions.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I like, you did mention a couple of, it was another question I had missed. You did mention a couple of very, very important things. The first being, the high-tech anthropologists being immersed in the experience. Now, the beautiful thing, which I know is a huge difference, is whether you're even an agilist, quote unquote, an agilist or a regular PM, asking the customer or end user about what they need, basically using use cases or whatever, user stories to document or capture what the expectation is and how you will test afterwards and so forth, might not help fully. And the reason why it will not help fully, like you've pointed out, is the fact that there will be specific inefficiencies in the way the end user is basically going through, even in the workflow itself. The workflow itself might be filled with a couple of problems, and the way the customer is thinking about things or the way the end user is thinking about things might also, even if you build to specification, it will still not delight at the end of the day. And that's it, is a problem. You just created what's the, and great thing that you did mention, Steve Jobs and Jim Iovine and the rest of them, who can go outside, think outside the box and engage and so forth. You wanted to mention something.
Well, and here's the thing. I guarantee you give me any set of programmers who've been in our industry for 5 years, and they have all had the experience where somebody told them to build something, or they asked questions about what, and they built it. And the end user sees it, or the sponsor sees it, says, yeah, that's what I told you to do, but it's not what we need. And you can call those people stupid, or you could call them like, well, I don't know, why didn't you tell me? I built what you asked for, but now you tell me it's not what I need. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if the project gets canceled and you worked on this for 3 years, 3 years of your life is wasted. So we have to learn how to gather the requirements in a way that will actually end up solving the problem we ended to solve. And again, we can complain all we want. We can even point fingers and say, well, it's not my fault, it's your fault. But that's not joy, right? We didn't get to the place where we wanted joy. And here's an interesting thing we do, Justice, in our iterative and incremental system. And this was one of those places where we improved over time because we saw bad behaviors or behaviors that weren't helpful, is probably a better way to put it. So at the end of every iteration, and we do weekly iterations here, weekly sprints, we have a demonstration hour with our clients about the work we did the previous 5 days. We call it a show and tell. Okay. Now, in the early days, what we did was customer would either arrive here at Menlo if they were local, or they would be on some kind of camera if they were far away. but we would show them the work we did the previous 5 days. And they, clap at the end and all that kind of stuff. But we noticed that a couple of things would happen. One is they were often distracted during show and tell. Maybe they're on their devices, maybe they're on their laptop, maybe they're answering 3 emails. And then a few weeks later, we'd show them something. They're like, well, why does it do that? And we're like, well, we showed you that 3 weeks ago and you didn't, I don't remember seeing that. Right? Yeah, because they were distracted. They were busy doing other things. I mean, most people are trying to multitask and that usually doesn't work well. So we did this really simple but powerful thing. We switched the roles. When we got done with a weekly cycle, we had our customer demonstrate to us the work we did the previous 5 days. Changed everything.
That's different.
Now, their hands are on the keyboard and the mouse. And they're like, well, what'll happen if I press here? That doesn't do what I wanted to do. Awesome. Great. We worked on this for less than a week and we find out we made a mistake. That's great news, right? Because emotions don't get that high if the sunk cost you're dealing with is only 3 or 4 or 5 days worth of work. When it's 3 or 4 or 5 months, people are going ballistic, right? Nuclear explosions coming out of their head because they think of all the money they wasted building the wrong thing. But by putting their hands on the keyboard and mouse, they are now engaged for the entire show.
Awesome. I'm enjoying this conversation. In my head, I am seeing the several situations and scenarios play out, right? And I see how that differs from current agile practices. Like you have agile events, right? For example, Scrum does have its own 2-week cycles, right? You have your planning and so forth. Then also whether your traditional project management, if it's a month-to-month, most project managers will do a month-to-month. You're reporting month-to-month, you're reporting variances and stuff like that. Maybe on a weekly basis, you are sending out reports as to how you track read and stuff like that. Yeah, you're doing that on a weekly basis. But outside those two, what you've mentioned regarding delighting the customer who don't have a full picture regarding what they will value at the end of the day, that's amazing. Then also having the customer be the ones to pseudo do demo. I might use that phrase, right?
And then what they do, which is fun for us, is they start bringing others in the organization in for the show and tell. They might even pick one of their team members who's actually one of the representative end users and say, here, you try this. See if it does what you want. And the richness of that conversation is amazing, right? Because people are looking like, oh, that's really good, but I need 3 of those, not just
exactly.
Yep. Or, what happens if it scrolls beyond the end of the page? Or, and they just give just this incredible high fidelity response to the work we did, which is delightful for our team. Because now all of a sudden people are like, hey, I worked on this thing for a week and you should have seen how engaged the customer was, right? They were excited. They were begging us, can you please, I can't wait to use this. And when we start hearing that, that's joy. That's joy. That's where our joy comes from. And what I appreciate about this conversation is I could even see it in your eyes when I'm describing this. You have lived through these yourself.
Scars on my soul. Awesome. And just a plug for the audience. Now, for anyone in the audience, any professional in the audience, are you on the LinkedIn community? Please.
I am
share. Yes,
very active on LinkedIn. So, please look me up. I'm Menlo Prez with a Z on LinkedIn, but my name is there for Rich Sheridan at Menlo Innovations. And if they mention you or they mention your podcast, I'll just say accept. So,
yep.
So that's easy. And I'm very responsive to messages on LinkedIn. And so, I would love to interact with your listeners if they're interested. I've written 2 books about all of this, at both Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. Get a lot of the books have been out for a long time now, and I'm still getting wonderful responses from them, from people. And there's some people who literally told me the books changed their lives, not because I'm this uber genius or anything, but I do think I figured out how to speak to the heart of the problems of the industry. And like this conversation with you, the things we've talked about are born out of the real problems of our industry and the real work you and I have both done in this industry over a long period of time. This is not theoretical. These are literally being used in the room right next to us right now on real software projects. So we've been doing that for 23 years.
Awesome. All right. So back to the interview. Now, we do know that Rich just mentioned something happened in the next room beside him. Now, so for those in the audience who don't know, and I will basically present this in the questions. Now, outside developing solutions for clients, Menlo does host tours.
Yes.
Right? And workshops. How do these help both ways? Yes.
Yeah. So we opened our doors from the very first day and said, come on in. We'll share with you what we've learned. And so there's nothing we do here in terms of our process or our practices that is a trade secret. We readily share our lessons with the world. And we usually get between 3,000 and 4,000 visitors a year who travel from all over the world just to come here and see it for themselves. So any of your guests are welcome. Some of the tours are free. We do offer one free public tour a month. Some of them are workshops. Some people stay 5 days. They do pay for those. We also learned during the pandemic, because everybody had to learn something new during the pandemic, we learned how to do virtual tours. So you don't even have to come here anymore. You can literally be here by the click of a button. And so in the early days of the pandemic, we were doing virtual tours of the then virtual Menlo. Now we're doing virtual tours of the real Menlo because unusually we are actually back in the office 5 days a week. And so people can come see it just by the click of a button. They don't have to leave their homes. They don't have to leave their countries. They don't have to book hotel rooms or plane tickets to come here. And we do one free public tour a month as well for people who can't afford our workshops or our classes or the private tours.
Fantastic. So this is not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So this is not like, so the Menlo way is not a packaged process sold through certifications. No, it's not sold through any certifications or any of that.
Well, real process that's used by real people on real projects. And here's what I say when I lead tours, and I try and encourage my team to do the same. And I want to say this to your listener. We have not found the one true way of working. That is not what we believe. We have found a way of working that works for us, that we believe in, and that is a very powerful force. We share that way with the world in the hopes to inspire them to find their own way. They can take any piece or part of what we teach or what we show. They can say, I really like the way they do that. I like the way they do that. We are honored when people copy some part of what we've done, but that's not our goal. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're not trying to tell people, no, if you're not like us, you're not going to succeed. That would be arrogance. And it would be untrue. There are many, many different ways to succeed. We found one that works for us. You can come see it and learn from us, and then take that where you need it to go for your own organization.
Fantastic. Awesome. And that leads me to the next question. Just to be, I'm a proxy for the audience here, so I know the answer, but I will just ask. So with evolving technology, right? How does that impact? Does the Menlo way evolve while keeping does the focus of the end user change? Does anything change with the Menlo way?
The core principles remain the same. What we want to do is delight the end user, not only with a wonderful user experience, but with solid, maintainable, working software. That's our definition of joy. Mm-hmm. And so the practices we have used, many have been in place since day one. Pair programming is a constant here. Test-driven design, automated unit testing frameworks, absolutely constant. High-tech anthropology, a constant. The way we do planning and estimation and show and tell, those have largely stayed the same over the 23 years. But the detail, the subtleties, the learnings, the different kinds of artifacts we create for certain projects because they had some special needs, all these things are constantly being injected when appropriate, evolving over time. And so, we have a famous phrase here that evolves the culture. And it is simply this. If somebody has a new idea, and your audience will probably appreciate this, in most organizations, when a new idea comes up, The first response is, well, that won't work here. That's against policy. We tried that 10 years ago. It didn't work then, it won't work now. Our answer is much different. Rather than try and say, well, let's form a committee and have a meeting about it, our answer is, let's try it. Let's run the experiment. Let's see what happens. If it works, great. Then we'll keep doing it. If it doesn't, then let's adjust. Let's try it another way. Maybe the idea was good, but the exact implementation wasn't quite what we needed. So let's try it a different way. And experiments here will come in. The really strong ones kind of stay forever. And the weaker ones, or the ones that were temporal, the ones that were needed for this project or for this month in this project, they come and they go. But that idea of just being open to trying new things, to take action versus take a meeting, really drives the spirit and energy of Menlo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for clarifying that. The principles you've mentioned are basically foundational, fundamental, and they will not change, right? But there's the openness to trying things, to experimenting, and so forth. What challenges now during it? I expect that probably during tours or even maybe some clients. What challenges have you encountered? What typical, maybe cross-cutting challenge have you encountered with enterprises trying to implement the Menlo way?
I would say that one is the biggest challenge in our industry is anybody who believes that designing and developing complex software is easy. It's not. This is regular human work. And in order to do a diligent, conscientious efforts, and I believe in my heart that the people who gravitate to this industry to build complex software are just really good-hearted people that all they want to do is do the best job they can. I believe we are a very servant-oriented industry. We want to serve others. That's our job. We're creating things that serve others. And everybody in our industry, I truly believe, has that servant-oriented heart. But it's hard work. It's just plain old everyday hard work. And I think the mistake that some people make when implementing any other process, if they're going to change, is number one, they think it's going to be quick. And it's not. Changing human behavior is one of the hardest things to change on the planet. Any of us who are trying to lose a few at the beginning of next year after January 1st know how hard it is, because we are creatures of habit. And so breaking those habitual patterns and trying things a new way is just hard. And we should be ready for that. Number two, and probably the biggest pathology I've found in anybody doing any kind of change initiative, and it doesn't matter what word you grab, whether it's the Menlo way or XP or Scrum or Agile or any other word you want to grab from business, Lean would be another popular example, is they adopt a new vocabulary, but they don't change any of their behaviors. Oh, yeah, we do that. We used to call it this. Now we call it a sprint. And I don't think so. You literally have to change behaviors, and that's hard. And it just is. And it's not impossible, but it requires a diligent change management, change mindset, kind of approach. And it's important work. Our processes and our behaviors are what drive our results. And if we're not willing to take a hard look at our processes and our behaviors and be willing to try some experiments to change some of them, we'll probably keep getting the same results we've always had. And the simple question is, are you happy with the results you're getting? And if you're not, what are you going to do about it?
Fantastic. Now, change management, of course, for those maybe aspiring PMs have ignored or won't, while learning and trying to get in, will not understand what will happen, the train that will hit them when they suffer from what can happen. But for experienced folks, that's a big thing. That's a huge thing. And for CTOs and CIOs, I know that some of them do have solution, like their lead solution designers, their lead solution architects or developers can be stuck in their ways.
Yep.
And that that can be in the way of progress. I'm speaking from experience.
Well, and I will tell you that often the reluctance to change typically is driven by existing reward systems. And I'm not talking about financial rewards, because those are the least effective rewards for changing human behavior. But unfortunately, many of the things that we are rewarded by are actually pain-filled. I'll give you an example. You go home tonight, you talk to your next door neighbor, and they say, "Justice, how are things going at work?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I can't even see straight up. I'm working so many extra hours right now. I'm going in this weekend. I hope I can have Christmas Day with my kids, and that sort of thing." And people are like, "Wow, that sounds awful," right? But what are you really saying when you say that? It's a reward to be able to say that, because what you're saying to your neighbor is, "I'm so valuable.
Yes.
They can't live without me. I am so uniquely valuable in my organization that they can't find anybody else to replace me." So those rewards, those existing rewards, are perpetuating a pain-filled system, because anybody outside, who's looking in, somebody like, say, from Bhutan, who looks for the gross national happiness index or something like that, is like, "Wow, Justice, that sounds terrible. Why don't you just quit?" And you're like, "Oh no, I'm really valuable. I'm really important."
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for chiming in there. Now, heading into the last question, you would see a lot of trends, and I am witnessing a couple of those. I do have professionals in the space and industry who are also coming up with a couple of things. From your own standpoint, what future trends in software development do you think might shape the next decade, and how does the Menlo plan fit in?
Well, I think there's no question that AI is going to play some role. I don't think any of us are exactly clear just what role it's going to play, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean it's going to replace programmers. It may make programmers more effective, but ultimately, one of the things we all have to consider when using any kind of tool, and it doesn't matter whether it's AI or something else that helps our productivity, the effects of using that tool have to be explainable by the people who are releasing it, because ultimately it's always going to be the humans that are going to have to explain the implementation, the behavior, and so on. So I think what will be incumbent upon us in the industry is to be able to use these tools, but use them in a way that is actually enhancing our understanding of what we're doing, rather than just simply turning our brains off and letting the computer run on autopilot from there. That's not going to be the right way to approach our industry, and it never will be. So I think that's absolutely a trend. And I would say, in terms of, what are we thinking about? Paying attention to these trends, experimenting with some of these tools, seeing where they would fit into our process to deliver better value, but still maintain the high quality standards we have, as well as that end user delight. And the fact that we want to make sure the software is imminently maintainable for the long term, and by people who didn't write it in the first place. And that's a really key goal of ours inside of our practices. We want the software to be maintainable by people other than the ones who originally wrote it. Most software can only be maintained by the people who wrote it.
That's the last piece, imminently maintainable, that you mentioned. That sounds like that is good music for in the hearing of CTOs, CIOs who contend with the cost of dealing with vendors for who knows how long, right?
Yeah.
As well as different support teams. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights and your allowing us into a couple of things on Menlo innovations. Would there be any? You did mention regular tours, and they can get to the site and find out those. But any specific service or workshop you want the audience to look out for coming up shortly?
Yeah, I mean, if some of your listeners, after this conversation, or maybe a deeper dive on some of the other things we've talked about, are really curious, we offer these workshops, Intro to the Menlo Way, where they spend a day here at our shop, not just in a classroom learning from me or others on the team, but going out and actually interacting with the people who do the work. So this is, I think one of the advantages of Menlo is it's a real practice. The things we talk about, we use every single day. And so the workshops are actually taught here in our space, and probably half the day is spent out in the room with the team members who are doing the work, seeing the artifacts that drive the projects, being able to ask every question you can think of. I tell every tour group that comes in, every workshop attendee, I can't imagine a question you're willing to ask that we wouldn't be willing to answer. And so the only guaranteed disappointment I tell people they'll have in a day or a week at Menlo, because we offer longer workshops too, is you will leave with more questions than you arrived, because our rabbit hole goes pretty deep here. And we will keep answering questions, as far as we can go in that amount of time. Our other very popular workshop is the Intro to our high-tech anthropology practice, because, again, it's a very specific practice that can be taught to others and then applied when they get back to work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will include details, of course, your details and the website, www.menloinnovations.com, in the description of the video. I will also flash a snapshot of the website so that folks can easily identify it once they try to search. We hope today's conversation has inspired the audience and you've had fun. I hope I've not been a boring host.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Justin.
Awesome. All right. So for the audience, we hope today's conversation has inspired and equipped you to rethink how software development can truly make a difference, and a couple of things that you can factor in. Rich does have 2 books. Those also will be on the screen. Rich does have 2 books. You can refer to them. But if you want more and you see that you're in an enterprise where you cannot speak up or speak out, and you observe that project management is going left, meanwhile you are going the other way, you might want to reach out to Menlo Innovations. And if you're in a position where you can fund a couple of workshops, that can be done. All right. So if you've learned something valuable, please engage, like, share, comment, and don't forget to click the subscribe and bell notification button to stay updated on more content connecting life and IT project members. Until next time, remember, every man is the architect of his fortunes. Thank you.